Hi, in this VLANs and videos. In this video, we're going to talk about types of VLANs. Okay, so by default, we do show VLAN and we see these. Okay, so what we have here, and actually I'm going to use this screen here, make it look a little more, there we go. We can see by default on many Cisco switches, first of all, they're going to have VLAN 1. That's the default VLAN, and that's what all of our ports are assigned to by default. And we also have these VLANs here, which are FIDI and token ring VLANs, which are really legacy nowadays. Yep. So by default, we have VLAN 1, also known as the default VLAN, meaning everything is assigned to VLAN 1 by default, unless we say otherwise. There's also something called the native VLAN. This is used for untagged traffic. This will make more sense when we talk about VLAN trunking. VLAN trunking is when we send multiple VLANs over the same link. Okay, we'll talk about this. So that'll make more sense a little later. User VLANs. So we usually separate our users, usually by functionality and geographic location, just like we set into various subnets, and each IP subnet will be its separate VLAN. We have the management VLAN, and we'll talk more about this a little later as well. But this is the VLAN we use to SSH, or in a lab environment, telnet into the switch or other devices. So we typically will have a management VLAN that we use to actually SSH into our devices, including our switches. So we'll see that, how that's used a little bit more later as well. Voice VLAN, this is usually the VLAN to connect our IP phones. Okay. And a lot of times we want to do this for various reasons. One is for quality of service, to give that VLAN priority in times of network congestion. Guest VLAN. So this is common in a lot of companies, a lot of schools. When somebody connects to your network, they don't work there, they're not a student there, they're not enrolled there, they're just a guest. And what you want to do is be able to give them at least internet access. So this would be a guest VLAN where perhaps the only access they have is to the internet and no internal resources. Then there's something called a garbage VLAN. So what a garbage VLAN is the VLAN that by default, which should be will be our default VLAN as well at some point when we talk about configuring the garbage VLAN. But the garbage VLAN is a VLAN that we put all of our unused ports into. Why would we have a garbage? And it goes nowhere. It doesn't connect to any internal resources, doesn't connect to the internet or anything. Why the heck would we want to have a garbage VLAN? Well, that way when you actually are configuring, you have a device that you're going to say, oh, I'm going to connect it to this port here. Let's make it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's say it's port 8 here. Okay, if I did my counting correctly. Port 8. Well, if it by default is in the garbage VLAN 777, when you connected this device to this port, you're going to have to explicitly reconfigure this port for the proper VLAN. Okay, so instead of it being on VLAN 777, say, oh no, that's got to be on VLAN 10. Okay, for the IT department or for faculty or whatever it might be. So it forces you to explicitly configure this port, because otherwise it's not going to be able to do anything. So it forces you to explicitly configure this port to be on the proper VLAN. So you don't just connect it and go, yeah, they're fine, and walk away. Okay. All right. So we call that the garbage VLAN. Okay. So user VLAN examples, as we can see here, we usually our user VLANs, they are segmented the same way our IP addressing schema is. So however our IPv4 and IPv6 subnet schema works is how we want to associate our VLANs. Okay. And there's some best practices to this that I won't go into right here. But as you can see here, we have a faculty device over here and a faculty device here. So these two switch ports. Now, the PC doesn't know what VLAN it belongs to, okay? It really just knows what network it belongs to. The VLAN 10 would be associated on the switch port. So I'll actually cross that out. The 10 would be on the switch port. Okay, same thing here. The 20 would be on the switch port. The 30 would be on the switch port. Okay. I'll finish that up here, and 30 here on the switch port. The only thing the host knows about is its network information. Okay, so in this case here, for PC1 can ping PC4 directly. So that would be no problem. They could communicate with each other directly. If PC1 wanted to communicate with, let's say, this PC2, that traffic would actually have to go to the router and back out. Okay, would have to be routed. Okay. All right, so our user VLANs, typically we do not want to put our users on VLAN 1. You'll see, you'll learn more about that as we go through these videos. But VLAN 1, so that's by default, all of our ports are on VLAN 1. Yeah. VLAN 1 is also known as the default VLAN because it's by default what every port is on. It's also known as the native VLAN. Now this will make more sense when we talk about trunking. Okay, so a native VLAN means that everything going across that port, that VLAN is untagged. I won't go into that now. We're going to talk about that in the next video. But one thing that is important about VLAN 1 is what all control traffic, when we get into trunking, all control traffic is sent between two switches using VLAN 1. Okay, talk more about that when we get into trunking, but that includes Cisco Discovery Protocol, VLAN Trunking Protocol, PAGP and LACP, which is for link aggregation, Dynamic Trunking Protocol, Spanning Tree BPDUs, and other kinds of control traffic. That will always be sent across VLAN 1. And by the way, you cannot delete VLAN 1. So the whole idea of VLAN 1 control traffic and native VLANs, that will make more sense when we get into trunking. Okay, so again, if I do show VLAN, shows everything by default in VLAN 1. Best practices is should avoid using VLAN 1 for anything other than the control traffic. Put all your various subnets, your user subnets, your management subnet, and everything else on its own VLAN other than VLAN 1. So in other words, create VLANs. Okay, VLAN 1, as we'll see later, will only be used if you're going to use it. Can't delete it, but will only be used for sending control traffic. Okay, so we will be using other VLANs like VLANs 10 and VLANs 20 for our user VLANs. Now, even though we show all these ports on two separate VLANs, let's say the blue ports are on VLAN 10 and the red ports VLAN 20. Have we removed VLAN 1 from the switch? No. We'll talk more about that when we get into trunking. Okay, so VLAN 1 is still there. It's just not assigned to any ports. Okay, so we'll see that more later when we get into configuration of VLANs, VLANs trunking, and this will all come together for you.